Welcome back to Empowered Voices, Recovery to Resiliency.
Yes, welcome.
In today's episode, Finding Your Voice, Mind, Body, and Spirit, we're exploring holistic recovery approaches that integrate mental, physical, and spiritual wellness. You can call it kind of whatever you want, but there you go. So our hope is that you, our listeners, and those watching will learn about the interconnection of the mind, the body, and spirit in the world of recovery, or in folks' journey in recovery. We have a couple expert guests today.
Yes.
One is a return, one is all brand new. We're super excited. But basically, what's our goal? That you'll sort of find this holistic healing experience and empower folks to find their authentic voice in recovery.
Which is truly important. So for this episode, we are welcoming back our fabulous therapist at Empowered, Rachel Williams. She's a licensed clinical social worker with our Empowered program. I absolutely love this woman. And also joining with us is a very special guest. We have guest Dr. Stephanie Woodard. Now, I'm going to read from here so I can make sure you get all your accolades. Dr. Woodard is a licensed psychologist and systems-level consultant with a focus on population health strategies to improve behavioral health access, quality, and outcomes. She received her doctorate in clinical psychology from the PGSP Stanford PsyD Consortium. Dr. Woodard served as the State of Nevada Department of Health and Human Services, State Mental Health Authority, and Single State Authority for Substance Use Disorder Treatment, Prevention, and Recovery, where she provided visionary leadership on policy and practice across the public behavioral health system. Her clinical practice has focused on supporting individuals with co-occurring disorders, trauma, and health conditions using a range of mindfulness-based cognitive and behavioral therapies. Dr. Woodard is a clinical associate professor at the University of Nevada, Reno, where she enjoys teaching and consulting on clinical research. She is a certified yoga instructor and considers herself a lifelong student in the practices of mindfulness and meditation. Welcome.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, Rachel and I work together all the time. So,
Yes.
But that's not to diminish your presence here. Okay. But Dr. Woodard, So I'm biased because I've worked with Dr. Woodard now for a while. But holy smokes, this you could probably write 2 more pages and it would still be amazing and continue. But to sum it up, she has been a guiding light in this like ever source. She was our original Chat GPT before Chat GPT existed for all things sort of like mental, physical well-being here in the state of Nevada, like running the show. So
awesome.
Kudos. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Woodard.
you.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. So to kind of start things off, let's look at the mind-body connection, okay? Because recovery is what we call sort of holistic, all-encompassing. It really does span across multiple dimensions of a person's life and health. Okay?
Yes.
So let's start off with Dr. Woodard. Can you provide us some insights into how do the mind, body, and spirit interact?
Such a great question. And I think part of the answer is that while we think of them as separate and distinct, they're actually very interconnected. And so I think maybe an example of how they may interact can help. So thinking about mind, body, and spirit, when the mind is at peace, feeling relatively tranquil, when an individual feels safe, their body can relax. And oftentimes they're able to connect with the people that are around them and feel connected to themselves. When that is disrupted, we often find that sometimes the mind wants to take the lead. This is where we have people looking ahead, sort of worrying and feeling sometimes overwhelmed. Anyone who has felt overwhelmed will know what that feeling is like in their body, right?
Yes.
You start to feel your heart rate goes up, you feel anxious, you feel unsettled. And oftentimes when we're coming from that place, we feel sometimes disconnected from ourselves and others. So in the most simplest of terms, I think that's an example of how mind, body, and spirit are kind of interwoven.
Yeah,
I love that.
and you know, gosh, we see this all the time, right? Such a common sort of feature in symptoms that folks experience that are like, let's call it on the anxiety spectrum of things like panic attacks, generalized anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, is that sort of separation, right? I have this out of body experience. I feel like I'm not. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that sort of when we are hyped, it is difficult. I spent some time treating veterans from Operation Enduring Freedom, OEF, and OIF. And we had really, I would say, significant rates of PTSD with folks coming back. And one of the pieces of that was even back on base, they never felt safe. A bullet will come through a barrack sort of thing, right? And so it was that constant on guard that really sends things through the loop. We can get sort of really technical talking about our nervous system and parasympathetic, sympathetic, fight or flight or freeze kind of stuff, but we don't need to. Rachel, thoughts along the same subject? Sort of how do you see things interacting?
Well, I mean, obviously, I have kind of the same opinion. It's connected. We have lots of science and, just personal experience and then just working with clients. So, how our body feels sends signals to our mind, and same thing, how our mind is sends signals to our body. So you kind of can't separate that. And then there's like something really special about like the spirit part of things, I think, especially working in recovery. I've got to see people pull strength from, their higher power or whatever that extra consciousness is that we haven't been able to put our finger on. And that seems to be like a big part of recovery from anything, whether it's substance use, mental health, trauma. So I don't think, you can separate it. It does work together. And I know in our work, when we're looking at all of it, it works better. So helping a client learn to calm their body and their mind and try to find connection without those three pillars, it's really hard to maintain one. So if we're teaching just cognitive techniques, then your body's freaking out, that won't be helpful, and vice versa. And then again, if you're not feeling connected to yourself, to something bigger or to, each other, then it's really hard to maintain something good without maybe wanting to numb out or hurt yourself or somebody else.
That is so true.
Yeah. Amani, so we've heard some of these terms like the mind, the body, and really we've mentioned a third term, which is sort of not tangible. The other ones are. Like I can poke things like the mind kind of in a way, right? But touch and feel things like the mind and the body.
Yes.
But we're saying this thing of spirit. Can you just sort of elaborate maybe in your experience what that was?
It is so funny that you say that because as Rachel was speaking, Rachel was my therapist when we were Empowered, or when I was a client with Empowered. And one thing she would always tell me is she would teach me all these life skills, coping mechanisms, all these different things to help me quiet my mind. But and I would practice them too. But she said, I noticed, Samani, you're at your best when you read your Bible. For me, God is very important. I feel like that's the reason why I'm actually here today. And so she would tell me, I need you to go back and add your Bible reading time in the morning or your prayer time, whatever it is for you to connect with your higher power, which, for me is God. She said, I need you to connect with that. And once I did, it really, truly helps. It gives you something to truly focus on and to know that you're not really in control over everything and that you can actually take some of that worry off. I know they say cast your cares upon the Lord, so that way you don't have to worry. It does help take a relief off. I know for Empowered, we run a Thursday group. It's our women's kind of like check-in. And I love it because first of all, it's not in person, so it's really cool. So anybody can really come. But the three things they ask is, how are you doing mentally, physically, and spiritually? Those are the three questions they ask. And all of us ladies, we go around and we talk about how we're feeling mentally, how we're feeling physically, and how we're feeling spiritually. And we'll find that a lot of the times we're really on a good day, we're feeling great out in 2 of those 3 areas, but it's never all 3.
Yeah, those are really good days, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Woodard, from sort of that, your scientific educational background, can you provide some insight into what we sort of mean when we say spirit?
I wish I had a great answer for that, especially academically speaking. But where I think sort of spirit comes in is this idea of being connected to a sense of higher purpose. So we can sort of parse out these interconnected parts of mind and body and spirit. But when we look at what is really core to sort of optimal functioning for people, it's a sense of mastery, right? That we feel that we have agency in our lives, that we have the ability to do something and we can do it well. That we have autonomy, that we recognize that we have opportunities for freedom of choice, and that we can exert some sense of self-direction in our lives. That we have a sense of belonging and connection to ourselves, connections to others. And often when we talk about spirituality, we're talking about feeling a connection to something that's bigger than ourselves. And then also just this sense of really having a sense of purpose. So it's sort of like the internal question of what is my why? Why am I here?
Yes.
What do I bring to the world? And so I think, people often get religion and spirituality sort of conflated. We sometimes equate the two together. But while it's true that people who practice a religion may be very in touch with their spirituality, you don't necessarily have to practice a religion to consider yourself someone that is spiritual and that is consistently sort of cultivating your spirituality.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you, because now I can use that with patients. So the reason I was probing a little bit is because I was definitely of the notion before I got into the specialty of psychiatry that things like spirituality meant religion. And how that kept coming up in the world of substance use are our 12-step groups, right? Whether it's NA or AA. I would hear from a large proportion of patients, I can't go because it's about religion.
Yeah.
And I didn't have an answer because I didn't know myself, right? But now sort of hearing things like Dr. Woodard is saying is that they really are two distinct things. And I think at those mutual self-help groups, like our 12-step groups, it's really more about what Dr. Woodard mentioned, sort of spirits, this higher sense of purpose versus you need to believe in God and that's what's. So thank you so much, Dr. Woodard. I hope that's really valuable for our viewers and listeners to know that they are separate. So we're really not talking about religion per se when we talk about spirit.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Woodard.
I was just going to add, I do think that in traditional sort of Western treatment modalities, oftentimes we leave the spirituality part out. And I think that we do our patients and clients a great disservice because for many people, it is really central and core to who they are and part of their identity. Yeah. So to ask someone to leave all of that outside of the door when they're coming in to treatment and care, I think leaves out a really critical component that when we can make space for it, and we can help people really feel safe and secure in exploring that part of themselves and bringing that into sort of their holistic view of what recovery looks like. They're really able to join with us in a very different way.
Yeah, and we'll actually dive into that, the sort of like that's a big part. And if we miss that part for folks, that's a huge disservice. Yeah. It's a huge disservice for their road to recovery. So we've been talking about these sort of general themes. I want to dive in deep. Like, what are therapeutic approaches that you find effective in regards to these? Let's start with Rachel, then we'll go to Dr. Woodard.
I mean, I think, again, it's kind of a difficult question because there's like multiple answers.
Yeah.
Every client I've worked with has been so different that like I've used different therapeutic approaches with everybody. I think the biggest part, though, for me is like just kind of this unbiased exploration when I first meet them. Instead of assuming like they need to go to church or they need this or they need that or they don't know any coping skills or they don't know how to calm their mind, just really asking and kind of, sitting back and putting your own personal biases to the side. Because again, everybody's connection to their mind, body, and spirit looks different. Yes. And then everybody can explore different ways to do that. So that's where I can come in, where I can ask the questions, explore, and then we can say, okay, well, if you've tried this to connect with your body or spirit or mind and it didn't work, let's try this. Or if this did help, let's do it again. Kind of like I've told some other clients, if they've identified, like, this practice really helped me a couple years ago, I felt strong, I felt like myself, okay, then let's reintroduce that. So, I mean, mindfulness is a huge one, and I think for us, again, the word got really popular and everybody thought mindfulness is sitting and breathing. Which again is mindfulness, a form. But I like to just show my clients that there's different forms. So when I ran mental health group at Empowered, for the first part of group, we tried just different mindfulness. So we did mindful eating, we did mindful walking. Everybody liked mindful eating, except I teased them with a piece of candy, and they all said that was a little cruel, but they enjoyed it more than they've enjoyed other pieces of candy. So like mindful walking, mindfulness with like something on the screen, mindfulness, again, audio. And then we tried some breathing too. So just showing people that mindfulness looks different. Sometimes it's even just like hyper-focusing on something. So last week we did a group and I passed out fidget spinners that somebody had donated to us. Yeah. And we did a mindfulness exercise where we just hyper-focused on the feeling, the color, the weight, the shape. So mindfulness can look different. So again, I really like mindfulness strategies because you can meet somebody wherever they're at. If they can breathe for 10 minutes, we build on that. If they can't, we, walk in place for a minute or two, or just notice our feet in our shoes.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Great. Dr. Woodard.
I love what Rachel's talking about, because she's talking about really meeting people where they're at and using some radical curiosity to explore what is and is not going to work for someone. And I think having latitudes of freedom to do that exploration is really important. When we think about mindfulness, we're thinking about paying attention in the moment on purpose, right? You're giving the mind a place to sit. And oftentimes we are very distractible, and that is part of the human condition. One of my teachers calls it a practice of 1,000 beginnings, because even in a few moments of trying to just attend to your breath, you may notice that your mind wanders, and you gently and with non-judgment bring it back to focusing again on the breath. So I just love that idea of a practice of 1,000 beginnings. I think, we, in our day-to-day busyness, just as humans occupying this earth, oftentimes are very sort of disembodied minds, right? We're oftentimes so busy, go, 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 and very up in our heads that sometimes we forget that we have basic drives that we need to tend to, like hunger and thirst and a need for sleep. So many of us are walking around sleep deprived on any given day. And when you introduce sometimes some of the human suffering, sometimes being in the body can be very challenging for people. So it doesn't feel very safe to be paying attention to what is going on with them. And it's much easier for them to occupy space sort of above the neck. For other people, they may feel very overwhelmed with what their body is sensing and feeling for them. And there feels like a disconnection between what they're thinking and how their body is feeling. So I completely agree with Rachel. I think that sometimes our talk therapies, our cognitive therapies can only go so far. It really requires a lot of, language and trying to put very complex emotions and thoughts into words. And so for some people, really focusing on the body and helping to regain that connection between what they're thinking and feeling and the sensations in their body can be really very powerful. And to also help people gain a sense of sort of calm. So that neither their mind or their body are really kind of running on autopilot, where they don't feel that they can really tune in and really start to find ways to find a sense of peace and calm.
Yeah, and Amani, I'm going to get to your thoughts, but when we're talking about sort of, so what are some maybe approaches that folks can use for the mind, for the body, to connect sort of spiritually? We're talking about the body. In my line of work, a few things that I really like are Dr. Woodard, of course, mentioned these, right? Sleep. So sleep, really important. And I'm not going to sit here and say you need to get 7-8 hours of sleep, right? Most folks kind of know sort of what their range is. And okay, that was sort of what I needed to recharge, reboost, those kinds of things. Nutrition. I mean,
Yeah.
our evidence supports nutrition. So, like, again, I'm not here to prescribe any sort of diet or counting calories or anything like that,
Yeah.
saying eat vegetarian. Or what we sort of see is the more whole foods that you eat, not the grocery chain, but just like things that are sort of natural and less processed, the better off people do. Another one is, and here's where sort of substance use comes into play. So we're really talking about, for me, the other parts is avoiding mood altering sort of substances.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're sort of playing in this field of, well, folks that are in recovery, substances was the thing. But it is really challenging, right, to sort of partake in all of these other things when someone is using substances, because they do affect the mind and the body, right? So stimulants affect the mind in certain ways, and then it affects the body in certain ways. I mean, we're talking about ramping up. That's as ramped up as we can kind of think of, you know what I mean, when it comes to, so specifically I'm talking about methamphetamine, right, along the stimulant route. So anything that you can to cut back on those kinds of things. If you have a physical illness, this is where the sort of connection between mental health and physical health comes in. At the same level, if you have uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled high blood pressure, things like that, working to get those things under control, because when we feel crummy, we feel crummy-er, right? Amani.
Well, this is all new to me. I'm not going to lie. I'm learning a lot, because I know when I think of like spirituality, I think of really, it's like what takes you to, I like, when you think of religion, that's what I think of in my head. So I loved how you just deciphered the two of just, it's not really about religion, it's about purpose. It made me think of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I can't remember every little step in that, but it reminded me of, in that hierarchy, in that triangle, it literally incorporates mind, body, and spirit. In that whole thing. And I'm a firm believer of that Maslow's hierarchy of just having just that stability. And so once you're stable, you can actually just calm down. And then it makes me think of when you're actually in a stable place, meaning when your mind's stable, when you're not using mind-altering drugs, because you are right. It is hard to be at peace when you are still using. It's hard to be mindful when your mind's rushing a million different miles per hour. So I thought that was very interesting. I'm really taking it all in. I'm really enjoying this, and I'm learning a lot.
So one other thing I wanted to add, which is also really important, is sort of one of my pillars of non-pharmacologic treatment, which means non-medicine based activity, sort of moving your body. Do I want to call it exercise? I kind of don't,
like to
because
call it
then that sort of
movement.
same thing that implies, wait, does that mean going to the gym and lifting weights or whatever, getting on a treadmill? No, it doesn't. Speak a little bit to that, Rachel, and then I want to hear from Dr. Woodard, because I just found out something new, that she's like a super master in yoga. So, okay, go for it. So like that activity, exercisey, moving your body kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I think if we just think of like humans as natural to earth, we were made to like move a lot more than we have in this modern era. So I think it kind of makes sense that when you add a little bit more movement, you feel a little bit better. And then of course, I can't list off the science, but like I studied it at some point where, you know, as you move, you generate, you know, certain chemicals, and you know, help your body, again, do what you want it to keep doing. And some of the physical stuff is a little bit like mental, kind of like use it or lose it. So as we're moving, we're like opening things up. We're training our body that like we're alive, we can move. With a lot of complex trauma or people that grow up in really rough like environments, you can see this kind of constriction of the body. And a lot of that is some of the chemicals from that like activated state. So it sends signals, and again, I'm not going to use all the specific terms because I can't remember them right now, but your body gets really tight. And often if I start working with a client that, has been through a lot, you can kind of physically see it. Sometimes they're a little hunched. Sometimes you can tell shoulders are up here. They can't seem to really relax. And so when you're moving your body, you're also moving out whatever you kind of stored. So emotions can get very physical, and we feel them. That's why we call them feelings, I think.
Yes.
So as we're moving, yes, we're doing something healthy for our body, but we're also improving mental health by like releasing and kind of letting go and flushing some of that stuff that we had stored up that might contribute to not feeling safe in our body. So I think movement is important. And again, I try to approach it with my clients and myself as like really flexible. It doesn't have to be in the gym. Like me personally, I don't like gyms. I've tried different types. It doesn't work for me. For me, I found at-home yoga, or like sometimes I go to a park and do yoga. I like walking, hiking, more physical like activities versus working out, because that's just been different for me.
Yeah, of course.
So I think, again, just being open. I have some clients that like to go swimming. That's their thing. Skiing, again, some people have extreme sports. I work with some people that, go snowboarding, and I have one person that does something called luge that I think is so cool. Yeah. So again, people find different ways to move their body. It doesn't have to be in a gym. It doesn't have to also be yoga, because I know a lot of clients where, sitting a little bit more still with our body isn't as comfortable. So again, just helping them explore. We have a really awesome physical therapist that will come out sometimes and work with our ladies on different movements. So she's worked with them on like constricting different muscles, or she's done some yoga for us. So also showing people that there's different ways to move their body, I think, is important. Not, again, just classes or like the gym.
Yeah, totally. And the tension thing that you mentioned, absolutely, it's actually a diagnostic criteria for anxiety. Do you have muscle tension? Do you feel tense?
Yeah.
All those things that you mentioned. Dr. Woodard, tell us about your world of the physical and the moving your body.
So way back when I was in graduate school, I had an opportunity to work as a personal trainer. And the majority of the people that were coming in that would work with me were actually women making a transition sort of through the perimenopause life phase. And what more often than not was occurring was that they had gone sometimes decades without really tuning into what their body needed when it came to just basic movement. We see, often there's the sort of conflation between exercise and yoga or other kinds of movement practices. And certainly people will use yoga as exercise, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I think the goal for movement really is to help to attune the body and the energies in the body to allow for space and movement. We know that our bodies are meant to be used. They're meant to bend and flex and lift and reach and do all of the things that we as humans need to be able to do. And it is very possible that people go a long time. We have a very sedentary lifestyle for most people. They go a long time without really tuning into what their body needs and how it needs to be able to move. And yet we need them to last a really long time. And we know that we have to use them in order for them to last a long time.
Yeah.
When it comes to sort of bringing it into therapy and treatment, so much of what Rachel said is just so rich with wisdom. This idea that, helping people really tune into where are they storing some of that emotion or feeling in their body, to help them find ways to tune in and tap into those areas, to find some of that energetic release. Certainly working with individuals with trauma, we see that there's a lot of trauma that can be stored in the body. And if you're only doing sort of the talk therapy, the cognitive therapy, you can often miss out on really finding ways to alleviate some of that physical suffering that people are carrying with them. Finding ways to integrate whatever kind of natural movement works for people into sort of that holistic therapeutic plan can also help them sort of maybe find new and different ways to move their bodies and re-engage sort of that mind-body connection. We also know that things like just breathing and finding ways to attune to your breath and teaching people skills to be able to breathe more mindfully can help them tune in any given moment to what is going on with them and their physical sensations. And also maybe bring a sense of calm or at the very least a sense of centered presence when we can focus on the breath. And then there are all of the other real amazing physical attributes that come with things like cardiovascular exercise, where you're really getting the heart rate up. You have natural endorphins that can take over. And those are some feel-good chemicals that are naturally occurring that can actually lend itself to greater overall health and wellness over time.
I mean, these are amazing things. Yeah.
Yes, our bodies are amazing.
Sounds so. This is gosh. I'm like the cliche. What is it? Cakes and rainbows, or cupcakes and rainbows, whatever. You know.
Oh, I know what you mean.
But when someone's in recovery, I see this as an issue sometimes. It's really tough to articulate these kinds of things. To articulate, oh, you know, like I used to have fun doing this, or I do store my trauma or my tension or my anxiety in this way. How can folks, because we're talking about this holistic sort of recovery approach, I think being able to speak and have that voice or your authentic sort of voice for recovery, how does one come about? What are some ways that we can encourage folks to develop that in regards to, you know, these topics that we've been discussing? Complicated question, I know. So just have at it. Just go for it.
Can you kind of rephrase it?
Yeah, so like having someone who's in recovery and could be actively using substances, right? What are some techniques that we can use to let them know, here's how you might express, this is what's going to work for my recovery, whether it's the mind, body, the spirit. It's this activity. I need my family to support me in X, Y, Z. I really like, or I remember liking hiking, but I have no idea where to go now.
Yeah.
Well, we're here local in Las Vegas. So do I go hiking in the middle of August at 1 p.m.? No. You know, just, I mean, anything along those lines of folks being able to articulate and speak about what might work for them versus me as a clinician, which I don't say, but imagine if I did say, well, I need you to go to the gym and, you know, 30 minutes a day of weight training and da-da-da-da.
Well, I think like a more formal intervention is like motivational interviewing. So like that's all about just exploring and like helping lead the client to explore their thoughts, their feelings, and then come to conclusions of what might be good for them. So I think that's like the like formal one that I use is just motivational interviewing to see like, again, what do you think might work? I think also just asking kind of like knowing the capacity. So they might say some really like big goals, really big things, but like, you know, it would be helpful if I was on a beach right now in Hawaii with all my kids around me, that would fix everything. Okay, that's a great idea, but like, let's look at what you have access to. So then we look at, maybe we do visual imagery. Maybe we actually find some local beach. Maybe we can plan a family Zoom call. So again, even as a clinician, when they throw out big ideas, you can help look at what they told you before about their circumstances and help them kind of bring it down to something they have access to now. Just like if I'm somebody that might be using stimulants actively, it might be hard to go and to a meditation class. It might be dysregulating and not helpful. So at that point, we might work again on different things. Like maybe it's mindful walking at first if you're still using stimulants and you haven't been able to reduce it that much yet. I might not send you to a 30-minute mindfulness class where you're sitting and breathing, because that might make you, again, feel unsafe if you can't quiet your mind.
Yeah. Dr. Wood, thoughts?
One of the central points, I think, of your question is how do we create the space for people to be able to show up as their authentic selves?
Yes.
And I think that we talk a lot in sort of the therapeutic circles around sort of creating the container, right? So how do we create a safe space for people to be able to show up? and how do we join with them in meeting them where they're at? Rachel mentioned motivational interviewing. Really, at the core of motivational interviewing, right, is seeing the person who they are in the moment and what they bring, and offering an opportunity for them to show up and talk about what is really going on for them, and understanding where their motivations and drives are. What are they most interested in? So that you can join with them in supporting them and moving towards what that looks like for them. I think creating a sense of safety is really very important. And then that authentic human-to-human connection. More often than not, when someone is struggling with addiction, not only have they sort of felt a disconnection to themselves, but to others around them. And they may not necessarily trust how they're going to be able to show up in relationships with other people. And so being as sort of empathetic and accepting as possible, so that people can really feel that they can join with you. And then I think oftentimes, taking it slow. It's natural, I think, for especially therapists to feel like because somebody walked in the door, they're ready, willing, and able to make all of these changes. And so, let's get to work and let's get going. And I think that most people recognize that isn't always the case. And so really being able to create safe spaces where you can join with people and understand who they are and what led them to this place, and then what does recovery look like for them, can help them start to begin to articulate, what is the vision of the future state for them? What does it mean for them to be able to engage in treatment? And what are they looking for what their goals are? What are they looking to achieve?
See, I told you guys, I didn't even know how to ask the question correctly. And then Dr. Woodard nailed it.
Yes.
So that safe space, thanks for going there, because it is so important. Amani, if you don't mind, okay, so in your life, what did loved ones, those in your social circle, your circle of influence, family members, whatever it was, what did they do that helped create a safe space, if they were able to?
I know my family, they're just so loving. I just have such a loving family, so I did always feel safe. I did feel safe to share my feelings, but with respect. It's always a line, but I just felt safe, and I know that's something that it does make people feel like they can be their natural selves, is when you create a safe environment. I spent some time in the classroom, and that was my big thing. I would tell every student, this is your safe space, and I will make sure in every oomph in me to make sure that this place you will feel safe. And that's what I did. And they were able to be their natural selves. So then once people are able to become their natural selves, they're able to become vulnerable to you, to share the things that maybe like I would love to take my 5 kids on vacation on a beach, maybe that's something that somebody suffering with substance use disorder would never even say, because they're already looked down upon, just with the stigmas. And then more than likely, if you don't have any stabilization, and the most logical, I guess, mind would say, why would you even prioritize even thinking about a vacation when you need to be worried about having just a roof over your head? So, I mean, even just things like that, creating a safe space, having somebody be able to trust you enough to know that you're not going to judge them for just having grand dreams and goals and a future, but you're not at that state to where you can actually make the changes on your own.
Okay. Yeah. So I heard love, respect, non-judgment.
Yes.
Good?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. All right. Closing. I want to hear from you all and this is sort of looping back around to what we talked about a little bit earlier, which was, look, if we're talking about religion, if that's a big piece of someone's life, we can't exclude it because it is. So in this world of we're talking about holistic approaches to recovery, it really is that those pieces are all important. Now, for every person, there's different levels of significance. How important are they? But usually speaking, or generally speaking, all of them are. So tell us, why are they important, such that if we neglect anyone, we might struggle in the road to recovery? Dr. Woodard.
I think our traditional sort of treatment modalities oftentimes can leave out some really critical aspects to sort of wholeness and wellness for people. More often than not in the medical model, right, we're really looking oftentimes at symptom reduction and see that symptom reduction and stabilization are sort of the end. That's the goal. And I think we miss that because it's really a means to an end. And so when traditional treatment really ends when people may be identified as sort of stable or needing less care, we forget that there's a whole other life to live and a new opportunity for mastering new skills. And that is one of the reasons that recovery is so critically important. So thinking about it at the front end, really understanding what is central and most important for people who are coming into care, and recognizing that that may also shift and change while people are engaged in sort of traditional treatment. But to also be thinking about what does a life well lived actually look like for the person, and to make the opportunity for treatment to be not only focused on symptom reduction and stabilization and what it means to sort of check the boxes to successfully complete treatment, but really have them create the roadmap for what that life well lived looks for them, and to use treatment to look at all of the domains of wellness so that they're working on all of it together, so that treatment and recovery are really sort of one continuous unit, and they're working on all of their areas of wellness. That should, in my opinion, should be one of the primary goals of good, comprehensive, holistic care.
Yeah, I mean, the key phrase that I use with folks that I see is, I want to get you to a point where you're living the life that you want to live. Explain to me, describe to me what that looks like, and then sort of work backwards. Rachel, parting thoughts?
I think obviously what the doctor said was super important. You got to look at all of it. And I think to answer this question, I'm just going to give a little bit like of an example. So if I'm in recovery and I've stopped using opioids, and then I've ignored my physical health and I developed some chronic pain, one of the first things my brain might feed me is this idea of, hey, you can numb it with this, right? And then vice versa. Let's say maybe I got, clean from stimulants, but I have an untreated mental health disorder. That could drive me to explore stimulants again to manage that if it's not something. So I think that just kind of, those two examples can show how, like, in recovery, we got to look kind of at it all, because people are also facing some different, like, brain patterns and things. And sometimes when we're in pain or in discomfort, our brain will, like, shoot us highlight reels, because its main function is to maybe, like, help us survive, not always, like, do something that's healthy long term. So I think that that's kind of important. And I think too, just on a clinician side, because I know we talk about stigma often in this podcast, is when we're doing a history of substance use and problems, is kind of treating it like we would, again, medical or mental health. And I think that opens also up the space for people to be honest. So if I'm not like, oh, you used for 20 years, if I'm kind of like, I'm taking anxiety, okay, when did anxiety start?
Right.
How old were you? When did the symptoms start? I think that also, again, just opens it up, because now we're kind of, not stigmatizing that, like, you did something bad. We're just getting that history. And I notice on my end that people are a lot more forthcoming when I'm just treating it, again, like I would any other issue that somebody's coming to me with, instead of being like, well, yeah, you got to stop right now. What do you mean you're using? Nope, we take down the history. We figure out what's your best. Like, I like to ask, like, how do you feel sometimes? What's the longest you've been able to go? And again, not as a challenging question, but to give them a point. Okay, you did 3 days. Yeah. What if we made it into 4? Like, we wonder how that feels. So I just to speak a little bit on stigma, I just wanted to throw that in there. Because I think clinicians, we could do a bit of a better job putting aside, again, the concern about substance use and really just being with that person and because they have concerns too, or they probably wouldn't be in our office, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, and you brought up stigma. I think it's a recurring theme. I think it's made its way into maybe every episode we've ever done, and it should. And it should.
It definitely.
Yeah.
I just have to say real quick, though, Rachel, piggybacking off of what you said about body, mind, and spirit, when you were saying how a lot of people, when they stop using, they ignore certain parts. So in my journey, when I stopped using, my goal was just to stop using. And so if I'm staying in a house. I didn't live in a safe neighborhood. I'm not going for walks anymore. So I gained a little weight, and there is every so often, the thought will run through your head like, hey, to take that weight off, girl. And it's like, no, it will. I mean, it will. But I mean, it'll take everything else out too. So I just had to tell you that is so true. And then it does bring into light why it's so important to take care of your body and your mind and your spirit. And knowing that your spirit is truly, just your purpose, your why, what is your reasoning for living. I love that.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
What a great
mind,
topic.
body, spirit. Try not to neglect.
Yes.
Try to identify what works for you to help in those three facets of your existence.
And small changes. Maybe just add one thing or take one thing away.
Steps. Yeah, baby steps. What's that? What's the other line? Even a journey of a thousand miles starts with one step.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, will you close us out, Amani?
Oh, yes.
I'm
sorry. You put me on the spot.
I totally put you on the spot. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was such a great conversation. I love talking about stuff like this.
We'll talk with Jason to maybe have you replace me as one of the co-hosts on this series because your knowledge is invaluable. The way you navigate this world and what you've done for our state of Nevada, I think, has been priceless. So really, and it's been an honor and a privilege to have you on our show.
Yes,
thank you for letting me join.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you for listening or watching to this episode of Empowered Voices. As always, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast as our next episode drops in a couple weeks. Also, don't forget to rate and share with others who may find our information and discussion topics helpful.
And thank you all for listening to Empowered Voices. Thank you, Dr. Woodard, and thank you, Rachel Williams.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
If you live in Southern Nevada or in Reno, Carson City, Churchill County, or Lyon County in Northern Nevada, or Weber County in Utah, and you're pregnant or recently had a baby and using opioids or stimulants for any reason, there is non-judgmental help available to you. No referral or insurance is required. Visit empoweredmoms.org for information or to request services. If you live outside these areas, we encourage you to find resources in your community.
Empowered Voices is a podcast production of the Empowered program at Roseman University College of Medicine, supported by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Overdose Data to Action grant through the Southern Nevada Health District. This project has been funded by grant number NH28CE003534 from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The contents are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official views of, nor an endorsement by the Southern Nevada Health District, CDC, or the U.S. government. Hosted by myself, Dr. Farzad Kamyar, and Amani Wilson. Executive producers are Dr. Andrew Peterson and Jason Roth, with production assistance by Rachel Mack. Recorded at the Video Podcast Studio in Las Vegas, Nevada. For more information about this podcast and past and future episodes, visit empoweredmoms.org.